Settle in for an evening of mystery, mayhem, and exploration of the dark side of humanity. I'm Dr. Shiloh, a former cop.
And I'm Dr. Scott, a former Hollywood casting director. Now we're both forensic psychologists working in Southern California.
Are you fascinated by the twisted minds that commit criminal acts? Do you ever wonder, how could they do that?
In each episode of our podcast, LA Not So Confidential, we dissect the nexus where true crime, forensic psychology, and entertainment meet.
Dee Blanchard was exaggerating her daughter's medical condition for financial gain.
We serve up fascinating cases viewed through the lens of human behavior.
Brother, why is your brother afraid of you?
Because I hurt him so much.
Delivered with our signature gallows humor while examining the actual diagnoses and dishing on the media portrayal.
The kids are my life.
Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential anywhere you go for podcasts.
Come and join us for LA
Not So
Confidential. Trust us, we're doctors.
Hey everyone, I'm looking forward to seeing you at CrimeCon UK. Use the link in the show notes below to save 10% on your ticket for CrimeCon UK in London this June. I'm going to be doing a live show with a few of my favorite podcasters. I'm going to be joined by Josh Hallmark of True Crime Bullshit, Charlie from Crime Lines, Lainey from True Crime Cases with Lainey, and Nina Instead from Already Gone. The show is going to be on March 5th from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Rio Bravo Brewing Company in downtown Albuquerque. Tickets are available right now. All you have to do is click on the link in the show notes and you can get your very own ticket to True Crime Live in Albuquerque. I want to thank Jackie Moranti for writing and researching this case. The rest of this series is going to concentrate on the timeline of events that were outlined in police reports. This is still an open investigation, so police have not released all the information on the case. There are leads that they're following up on that we can't talk about yet. There is still hope that 40 years later, this case can be solved. On August 5th, 1982, Father Reynaldo left St. Francis Cathedral to meet a man who called himself Michael Carmello at the rest stop on La Bajada Hill. Father Reynaldo Rivera was reported missing the following morning when he failed to return to the cathedral. An aerial search of the area was conducted on August 7th, but Officer Eric Lucero and pilot Gary Aycock had flown toward Cochiti along the highway. They were looking for Father Rivera's car, not his body. They went towards Waldo, where Father Geier told them that Michael Carmello's father had a ranch. Father Rivera's body was located on the other side of the highway, north of where the aerial search was being conducted. About an hour after the aerial search began, Lucero and Aycock were called back to the rest area by Sergeant Gilbert Ulibarri. When they arrived there, they were met by a man named Luis Perea. Mr. Perea told Lucero that he had been traveling along the Waldo Road from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. He stopped to stretch his legs and was walking in the pasture when he came upon the body of a man who was deceased. He told investigators where Father Reynaldo's body could be found. Father Reynaldo was lying on his back with his head tilted to the left. Blood had flowed from his mouth and coagulated around his neck. He had welts on his face, he had a bullet wound to his chest, his arms were outstretched, and he had abrasions on his wrists and arms as if he'd been tied up. He was wearing all black and his clerical collar was tucked into his shirt pocket. His left pants pocket was turned inside out. A small blue coin purse was found beside the body. His brother Fred arrived at the crime scene and positively identified the body as Father Rivera. Archbishop Sanchez arrived at the crime scene a short time later. He immediately broke down in tears. Father Rivera's car, a 1976 Chevrolet Malibu, was missing from the scene. Police immediately issued a bolo for the vehicle and another aerial search for the vehicle was conducted. At 1:45 that afternoon, Officer Steve Standridge of the New Mexico State Police located the vehicle at a rest area 20 miles east of Grants, New Mexico. It had been run out of gas and abandoned. A preliminary investigation of the vehicle for prints and photographs was done. Then the vehicle was sealed and towed to the crime lab for further testing. After interviewing Father Geier about Father Reynaldo's disappearance and the phone calls that preceded it, police focused on Michael Carmello. They found someone with that name in Ajo, Arizona. It was the only lead they had, so they put all of their effort into finding out who he was and whether he had anything to do with Father Rivera's murder. Detective Michael Bowen of the New Mexico State Police traveled to Tucson, Arizona to meet with Agent Bart Goodwin of the Arizona Department of Public Safety. He also contacted Detective Dan Ludwigczak of the Pima County Sheriff's Department, Ajo District. Detective Ludwigczak told Bowen that he knew Michael Carmello, and he was fairly sure that Carmello was in Ajo since he had seen him there the weekend before. They set up a time to meet with Ludwigczak for the following afternoon. Michael Carmello was well known to the police in Ajo. At the time, he was on probation for aggravated assault. His probation officer, Larry Baird, refused to make a house visit on Carmello because he was afraid of him. He had a reputation as a violent man with a very short fuse. Baird told Bowen that Carmello reported to the probation office every month, had no religious affiliation on record, and most importantly, had not gotten a travel permit to go to New Mexico. Other than that, Baird didn't cooperate a whole lot with the investigation. Next, Agent Goodwin and Detective Bauer stopped by the Immaculate Conception Catholic Church in Ajo before attempting to contact Michael Carmello. They wanted to speak with the priest there and get his take on Carmello. They spoke with Father Augustine Cataday. They asked Father Cataday if he knew Michael Carmello. He said that he didn't. They then asked him if there had been any incidents involving threats or vandalism at the church. Cataday said that there had not. Father Cataday had only been at the church for about 3 years, so he suggested that Bowen and Goodwin speak with Father Floyd Stromberg, who had been at the church for many years before. He also suggested that they speak with Robert Doyle, who ran an insurance agency in town and knew everyone. It was time to meet with Detective Ludwigczak, who told them about the assault charge and also let them know that Carmello was living with his common-law wife, Jeanette Carmello, who happened to work at the hospital. Ludwigczak offered to assist with the investigation in any way that he could. The Phelps Dodge Company was a mining company that provided employment for many of the residents of Ajo. The company had been around forever, so Deputy Ludwigczak came up with an idea to call them to see if there had ever been a man named Antonio Carmello working there. They checked their records dating back to the 1920s and found no one by that name on record. The detectives went to visit Robert Doyle, the insurance salesman, and Mr. Doyle told them that he only knew of Michael Carmello by reputation. And that reputation wasn't good. He had violent tendencies. The detectives also spoke with Mary Armfield, who was the administrative assistant at the insurance company. Mary had been born and raised in Ajo and knew about everyone. She told detectives that she couldn't recall anyone by the name of Antonio Carmello ever living in Ajo. But she did know Michael Carmello, and she also told police that he was violent. The more police heard about Michael Carmello, the more they believed that he could be their guy. It seemed that all roads were leading to him. Detectives finally caught up with Michael Carmello in the backyard of his residence in Ajo. They began to question him about the murder of Father Rivera. They asked him if he had ever been to New Mexico. Carmello told them that he was only in New Mexico once, about 10 years before, when he went to the Pruitt area. When Bowen asked if he had ever been jailed in New Mexico, Carmello said that he had never been jailed in New Mexico, but he had seen the inside of plenty of jails in Arizona. When they asked him what his grandfather's name was, he answered Alfonso Carmello, not Antonio. He told them that on August 5th he was in Arizona, but he couldn't remember if he was in Ajo or Tucson. Finally, detectives asked him if he was in Santa Fe and had anything to do with the murder of Father Rivera. Carmello's reply was, "Hey man, I got respect." The following week, Carmello took a polygraph test and passed. It was the opinion of the polygrapher that Michael Carmello had no knowledge of Father Rivera's murder, nor did he know anyone who did. Bowen wouldn't give up on his lead, though. He kept at it. He contacted Father Stromberg at Immaculate Conception, and the father told him that he didn't know much about Michael Carmello as an adult, but he did remember him as a little boy. He told police that the Carmello family were of the Papago tribe of First Nations and that about 90% of the tribe was Catholic. So he would find it hard to believe that anyone from the Papago tribe would be involved in the murder of a priest. The lead kept getting thinner, but Bowen pressed on. Agent Bowen contacted Candy Manuel, Carmello's ex-girlfriend. She told him that the only contact that Michael Carmello had with New Mexico was through Jeanette's family. But the only time she remembers him going there was when he went to Pruitt years before. When Bowen asked her if Michael had ever mentioned a beef with the Catholic Church, she said he never said anything about the Catholic Church one way or another. She also said that if he had any connection to Father Rivera's murder, he would have already run, and he certainly wouldn't be cooperating with police. She couldn't think of any reason that he would want to kill Father Reynaldo anyway. Police continued to investigate Michael Carmello. They contacted hotels and motels in the Santa Fe area for any registrations under his name at the time of Father Rivera's murder, but they found nothing. They also checked with all of the Native American schools in the area to see if he had ever attended any of these boarding schools. Again, none of them had any record of Michael Carmello. In January 1983, Agent Steve Herrera of the New Mexico State Police interviewed Jeanette Carmello's mother. Marie Francisco only spoke Navajo, so David Chavez from the Canyoncito Reservation came along as a translator. Mrs. Francisco told police that Jeanette had come to visit for Christmas in 1982 with her 2 children. Herrera asked her if Michael Carmello had come along with Jeanette to visit her. She replied that he had not. She told police that he wouldn't come to the Navajo reservation because he didn't like Navajos since he was Papago. She said that Jeanette only stayed with Michael off and on since they fought all the time. She then asked if Michael Carmello had any enemies in the Pruitt area. She told detectives that she didn't know of anyone in the Pruitt area who really cared for Michael Carmello. The police finally took their focus off Carmello. He might not have been the nicest guy, and he definitely had violent tendencies, but there was no evidence whatsoever that he killed Father Rivera. On August 25, 1982, police began checking into a man named David Ortega. Ortega had escaped from the San Miguel County Jail in March of that year and was apprehended in Lexington, Oklahoma on April 1st. He was sentenced in Cimarron County and was doing time at the Joseph Harp Correctional Center in Lexington. He had been at the correctional facility from April 1st through August 25th when police asked about his alibi. He was serving time for burglary. Another person that police were looking at was a man named Mark Paras, who had been arrested in connection with an incident at Our Lady of Assumption Parish. The church had been desecrated. Blood was spilled on the altars and a hunting knife had been left on the main altar. A threatening letter had been sent to the church about a week before. Paras had been cleared of the charges involving the desecration of the church, and his record had been expunged. But police wanted to know his whereabouts on the night of August 5th so that he could be ruled out as a suspect in Father Rivera's murder. Mark had been experiencing some emotional distress since his arrest. He was having severe headaches and dizziness. His mother told police that on the day that Father Rivera was killed, Mark was at the Loveless Baton Medical Center receiving treatment. His mother had picked him up from the hospital at about 3 o'clock that afternoon, and he had stayed home the rest of the day and the following day as he was recovering. He was back in the ER again on August 8th when the headaches became unbearable. His alibi was corroborated by the hospital, and Mark was cleared of any wrongdoing in the murder of Father Rivera. Several suspects were questioned in Father Reynaldo's death. Some of them seemed like a stretch. Rumors flew, people pointed fingers at one another, and speculation was running rampant. Agents Lucero and Herrera found themselves in one of those speculative situations when they interviewed the owner of Ray's Bar in San Fidel, New Mexico. Ray Maestas was the owner of the bar at the time, and he had been interviewed by Sergeants Eddie Castillo and Gilbert Ulivari immediately after Father Reynaldo's murder. Now, Lucero and Herrera were coming in for a second interview to see if they could clear things up. Ray called in a tip right after Father Reynaldo's murder, telling Ulivari that someone had come into the bar and tried to cash a government check that did not belong to him. This man was with another local man who had come into the bar with him and would vouch for him. Ray called in a tip right after Father Reynaldo's murder, telling Ulivari that 2 men had come into the bar and tried to cash a government check that didn't belong to them. The men wanted to cash a check, and they had told a man to help them cash the check, but Ray refused to cash it. He told detectives to go talk to Candido and get his side of the story. Candido told Lucero and Herrera that Wilfred Salazar was the man who wanted to cash the check. He said that Salazar had some relation to his wife and came to his home between 9 and 10 p.m. on August 5th or 6th in 1982 and asked if Candido could help him get the check cashed at Ray's lounge. Salazar told Candido to tell Ray that Salazar was Candido's cousin so that Ray would cash the check. Candido looked at the check and found it was made out to Salazar, and it was for an amount over $200. Candido and Salazar went to Ray's lounge, and Candido asked Ray if he would cash the check for his cousin Salazar. Ray refused to cash the check since Salazar didn't have an ID. Salazar left the bar and asked Candido for a ride to Grant's. Candido told Salazar that he didn't have any gas in his car, so he couldn't give him a ride. Salazar then asked another guy who was at the lounge named Ramon if he could give him a ride to Grant's. Ramon told Salazar that he wasn't ready to leave yet, but if he was still around the bar when he was ready to go, he would give him a ride. Candido described Salazar as being 5 foot 8 inches tall, 140 pounds with long curly Afro-style hair. When Candido had last seen him, he was wearing Levi's and possibly a Levi jacket. He had a pack of some kind with him. It was either dark green or black in color. Candido told detectives that Wilfred Salazar seemed very nervous during the whole evening. Candido ran into Ramon a few days later, and Ramon told him that he didn't give Wilfred a ride to Grant's. Ramon said he was glad he didn't give him a ride since he suspected that Wilfred was somehow involved in Father Rivera's murder. Now, I know that this is all speculation and quite a bit gossipy, but police had to check out the lead. We've previously talked about the letters that were received by law enforcement, churches, and even the governor's office in a previous episode. Today we're going to revisit that topic. A woman called Father Benito Suen, the parish priest in Hurley, New Mexico. The woman refused to give her name, but she spoke with a distinct Bostonian accent. She told Father Suen that she knew that Theodore Venus murdered Father Rivera in Santa Fe. She said that Venus was a mobster from back east who had been exiled and was now living in Phoenix. He hated the Catholic Church and would kill any clergy and burn churches. Father Suen thanked the woman for calling, then immediately called authorities in Santa Fe. Police found Mildred Jesus Almeida Erickson at the address she provided. While speaking with police, it became clear that Mildred was suffering from mental illness. Her story was disjointed and didn't make very much sense. Mildred again named Theodore Venus as Father Reynaldo's killer. She also told police that she was the one who wrote several postcards claiming that Theodore Venus was the killer. She had even hand-delivered one of her postcards to the governor's office. She told police that she had it on good authority that Father Rivera was murdered by Theodore Venus, who had mob ties back east and was currently living underground with the mob. She also told them that he was on a U.S. government hit list. When police asked her about her sources, she told them that she saw it on television. This was when detectives became aware that Mildred had some mental health issues. She told them that she was a famous actress and she had been talking to Bob Hope, Carol Burnett, and Johnny Carson, and that they told her that Theodore Venus killed Father Reynaldo. While the detectives were interviewing Mildred, the owner of the residence came home. He explained to the officers that he had found Mildred wandering around Hurley. She was homeless and he took her in so she wouldn't have to come to any harm. She hadn't been staying with him for very long and he had no knowledge of her past. He just wanted to make sure that she had a safe place to stay. Mildred continued to write postcards and make phone calls accusing Theodore Venus of Father Reynaldo's murder. Police attempted to find Venus, but they couldn't find anyone in Arizona or Massachusetts with a name fitting that description. They reached another dead end. Detectives scoured police files for anyone with a history of harming clergy. They found many along the journey. Leonard Montoya was convicted of robbing a Catholic priest near Espanola, New Mexico. He was released from custody in January of that year. He had been paroled to the Arizona Family Project, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center in Phoenix. Captain Carroll of the New Mexico State Police contacted the rehab to ask about Montoya's whereabouts between the 4th and the 6th of August in 1982. They were told that Montoya had been at the facility and had not received a furlough since he had arrived back in January. Montoya's mother told police that she had not seen him since he had gone to live at the Arizona Family Project. Marcus Harris and Lawrence Snyder appeared on the radar of the New Mexico State Police in late August of 1982. They were being held in the Doña Ana County Jail on suspicion of murder and kidnapping charges for an incident that happened on August 18th in Arizona. Marcus Harris had been recently released from the Dade County Correctional Institute in Homestead, Florida, where he'd been serving a prison term. He met Lawrence Snyder at a Jackson, Florida bus terminal, where the two men decided to travel together to look for work. Lawrence Snyder had been asked to leave his father's home in Danville, Pennsylvania, on July 14, 1982. He decided to head to Florida and stay with a friend in Melbourne for a couple of weeks before heading to Jacksonville to look for work. Neither Snyder nor Harris could find any work in Jacksonville when they decided to head west to Phoenix. They began hitchhiking across the country with the intention of ending up in California. They would stop and work for a few days here and there to help fund their trip. The stop in Arizona was supposed to be part of that funding. Harris and Snyder stopped at a truck stop in Phoenix. They were having breakfast when they were approached by two men. One was Reverend Don Hamilton, and the other, Frederick Smith. Don Hamilton had told Harris and Snyder that he owned a ranch about 17 miles outside of Phoenix, and he needed some work done. Harris and Snyder decided to take the offer of work since they were low on cash, and they accompanied Hamilton and Smith back to the ranch. Keep in mind that investigators spoke with Harris and Snyder while they were being held in the Doña Ana County Jail in preparation for extradition to Arizona, in order to stand trial for the murder of Reverend Hamilton and the kidnapping of Frederick Smith. While neither Harris nor Snyder would admit to having done anything with Father Rivera, they did talk openly and freely about the circumstances surrounding the murder of Reverend Hamilton. According to Harris, once they arrived at the ranch, Hamilton and Smith asked Harris and Snyder to undress and perform oral sex with one another, and Snyder refused to comply. And a fight broke out. Hamilton retrieved a rifle from a bedroom and fired 2 shots at Harris and Snyder, but Harris got the weapon away from Hamilton. Hamilton and Harris then got into a fist fight, and Harris ended up stabbing Hamilton several times. He then ran to help Snyder, who was grappling with Smith. He said that he cut Smith several times on the head and arms, but Smith was not seriously wounded. Rather than kill Smith, Snyder and Harris chose to put him in the trunk of the car that they had stolen from the ranch and take him with them so he wouldn't tell police who or where they were. Harris told police that he did have the rifle when he left the ranch, but he didn't know where the rifle was since he had thrown it out the window somewhere between the ranch and Las Cruces. The pair was apprehended in Las Cruces, New Mexico on August 23rd. During the investigation into Harris and Snyder, detectives working on the murder of Father Rivera called the Salvation Army in Florida, where they had claimed they were staying before they went to Arizona. A caseworker at the Salvation Army confirmed that the men were there on August 4th. Detectives also called the Salvation Army in New Orleans, Louisiana, and a caseworker at that location told them that Harris and Snyder were there on August 11th. The timeline didn't match, and police were again running down rabbit holes that had no apparent connection to Father Rivera. They were coming up with nothing, no matter where their leads came from. The police were under extreme pressure to solve this murder, not only by the archdiocese, but also the community. If someone could kill a valued member of the church, was anyone safe in Santa Fe? Nobody could rest easy. That was a lingering question as the investigation into the murder of Father Reynaldo would continue. Next time on True Consequences. Thanks for listening, and stay safe, New Mexico.